Welcome back. It's another episode of Standing on Business. Today I have the amazing pleasure of being joined by Jeff Deloff, chef, owner of Touche here in Syracuse. Jeff, tell us a little bit more about Touche. I love visiting the location. I love the food. Tell me a little bit more about how you started that business.
Uh, Touche in general is a French influenced restaurant that has a lot of Appalachian subtleties to it. Try to use as much local New York product as possible to kind of blend those three avenues together with the general idea that, you know, each of those different specific regions, whether it's Appalachia or New York or France for that matter, all have like the same cultural ideas when it comes to food. And they can just be blended together based on, in Syracuse and the surrounding areas. It started as a pretty large collaborative project at the very beginning. It was kind of approached to me as just like a generalized idea of like, we have a space. Would you be interested in being on board with this? And then I like a lot of ideas in the restaurant industry when someone's like, we have this opportunity, it's kind of like, okay, like when I get I see the space and see that we can do it, then, I'll be fully
Yep.
on board with it. And sure enough, within like 2 weeks after the initial conversation, it was like, no, we're going to move forward with it. And like, we just need a general pilot program, if you will, of what it's going to be like. And it was approached to me as we were going to do the whole animal butchery concept. And the biggest caveat that kind of entails is like, you can't just do it half-ass. It's kind of got to be a whole thing,
Yep.
pun intended in that aspect.
Yep.
In the sense that you can't just like start in one direction and then try to switch it and make your model work around it after the fact. You kind of have to build your model based on that beginning fact. And then I was like, if we can do that, then I'm 100% ready to go. And then that was January of 2024 is when we made the announcement, and then we opened in October of 2024. So, relatively speaking, it was a quick push to kind of get construction and all the licensing and everything and the equipment sourcing really into this space. And I think it really boiled down to just waiting for the liquor license to come in, which is like the longest argumentative process in New York State, I think, is with the liquor license. Because you're literally just at the whim
Yeah.
of the bureaucracy of New York State.
You're our second restaurateur that we have here on the Standing on Business podcast, and it seems like a general theme with the liquor authority and getting that license through. Tell me a little bit about your background. So Touche's kind of within the last 2 years here, but what led you to Touche? What led you to that moment?
Oh, I've started as a dishwasher when I was like 15 years old, and I think my idea as a kid, on top of like being, a paleontologist and a marine biologist and, all of the typical ideas that kids have when they're younger, I wanted to be in the military. My family has a history of the military, and then we spent a lot of time visiting different military bases and museums and things like that. And then I got some pretty solid advice from my uncle who worked at an Aunt Sarah's, which is kind of like a Denny's. It's like a smaller version of a Denny's in the South, or at least Northern Virginia. And he brought me in one day because he heard that I liked food and had the tiniest inclination of working in restaurants. So he brought me into work one day. It was like breakfast or something, and he manned like a 15-foot line all by himself. And I thought it was like, mind blowing to watch one person work like that cohesively
Yep.
on their own. And then after like the service was done, he kind of sat me down. He's like, if this is what you want to do, like, go do it. Like, go to school for it, get a proper education, or start working in it now. As opposed to what he did, it was kind of like a last resort, and that's like the only thing that he could do at that point in time was just like work as like normal line cook for his future. So then I got a job dishwashing. I was told at the time by the chef that I was the youngest and the only applicant who's ever came in wearing a tie for a dishwashing job. Um, and then I just loved it. Had my own separate room, and I worked with guys that were like 3 times as old as I was at that point in time, and I was just like a firecracker. Like I just ran circles around them. I would clean up as quickly as I could, and then go stand in the kitchen and just like watch. And if they would dirty one thing, I would grab it and then immediately run back, clean it so I could bring it back, and just watch. And then I'd always ask questions and purposely put myself in the way. And then the chef at the time was like, "Do you want to give it a shot and work over here and like work the salad or garde manger station?" And I was like, yes, I do. And then that solidified it. I think at that point I was 16, had no idea what I was doing, lots of cuts on my hands, but I loved every second of it. And then I went to the CIA in Hyde Park, um, lived in Roanoke, Virginia for a little bit, then came back to this area, bounced around between Syracuse and Oswego, and then I moved to Central Virginia. 2017, somewhere around there, and then came back during COVID to this area and helped start a few projects out in Baldwinsville, and then eventually found my way into Syracuse.
Are you originally from the Syracuse area?
I'm originally from Oswego, New York.
Oswego.
Yeah.
Sweet. So what brought you back, I guess, after, kind of going to Virginia, and what drew you back to coming back to Central New York?
Realistically, an opportunity, and COVID was happening, and like no one really knew what was going on. And at the time, I worked for a very upscale catering company, and then that like as soon as they announced the closures, um, we did a lot of weddings, a lot of large gatherings and stuff for UVA, and as soon as they started to announce like 100 people or 50 people or 20 people, and then the establishment I worked for was like, this is our entire bread and butter of what we do, so like who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
At the time I was already interviewing for a job in Rockland, Maine, before then, so it was like getting ready to leave no matter what. It just happened a little quicker given the circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. No, COVID was definitely a weird time of life. I know for us in the wedding industry, a lot of the just, okay, you can have a wedding, you can't have a wedding, you can can't have a certain amount of people, can't have a dance floor, can't have a dance floor. I know that it screwed up a lot of people, especially that relied on that.
Being in the food service industry, because at the time, as soon as everything closed, I was working at a whole animal butchery shop who I befriended because that's what I was doing in Virginia anyway. And as soon as like I got word that we were gonna, cease operations, I just went to the butcher shop and walked in the back door and was like, "Do you guys need help?" And they were like, "Yes, yes, we do." And we were just doing pickup, call in orders and pickup orders. Uh, you know, it's interesting to hear stories about other people in that time period, but it's like I had never stopped working at all. Like there was no like lapse of time.
Yeah.
It was like ended here. An hour later, I had an apron on and I was cutting up a
something
side
else.
of beef, and like
Yep.
it never really stopped. So I know people's certain perceptions of that time period are like, well, I didn't do anything, or I was at home, and I was like, I don't have that experience. I just kept working, and we talk about other industries and sectors closing during that. It's like food service, like no, like
Yeah.
the margins in this industry are so incredibly slim anyway that I don't think people could have closed if they really, really wanted to, because there's just so much investment financially and just physically and supply wise, because it's like if you just close, that's great. Like if you have a normal industry where stuff can sit on a shelf for a few months and you're fine because you already paid for it.
Yep.
Food is not like that. Food is like, we bought it,
Gotta use it.
we have to use it,
Yeah.
otherwise it's just a complete
Loss. Yeah.
loss.
Yeah. It's definitely it's definitely an interesting time for a lot of people that during COVID. I think for some people, like you said, it was that time to just, I'm relaxing from my office job. But for a lot of business owners, it was a time of pivot, because the way that they were used to doing things is completely out, completely that wasn't either allowed, or it's, it's changed in some fashion. So For a lot of people, it's exactly like you said. It wasn't a time of like let's relax and take it easy, but more, all right, we gotta figure out what's how we can continue doing this now, in what different way. How what kind of inspired the idea, the concept of touche? What that you said French and whole butchery. Can you talk to me a little bit about that passion of whole butchery?
Um, I think when I went to culinary school, it was very geared toward institutionalized, large scale, like working with large distributors and kind of like a meat grinder, if you will. Like just get into school, they teach you everything. They teach you kind of like the basics of like how to work within the industry and work with different purveyors and stuff like that. But all of the stuff that I ended up learning or got a little more passionate about, I did outside of school. And I moved to Virginia because growing up in Oswego and my concept of like what a farm was mostly soy, corn, and wheat. Like that's all that I really thought about. Like no one did a whole lot of interesting types of crops, despite the breadbasket of the Finger Lakes, and there's like 6,000 acres of organic soil that is used in the Finger Lakes. But in my concept, that I didn't know anything about that. My nativity and uh, just a lack of general understanding of how to work in those confines um, didn't exist to me. So when I took a trip to Fredericksburg just to kind of like, because that's where my mom is from, and I spent a lot of time there as a kid, and walked through a farmer's market, and I was like, oh wow, like this is beautiful. There's so much, and like it's so organic, uh, despite the word. Um, but it was natural. It was like a
Yeah.
lot of free flowing information, and I was like, I want to move towards that. So I took a position in Charlottesville, and I worked with an amazing owner there, and I was like, this is what I want to kind of lean into. And she was like, this sounds like a fantastic idea. Like, let's pivot. Let's kind of shift this. And I started working with a lot of local farmers that raised animals. And one specific conversation that I had with a gentleman, John Whiteside, he was a cattle farmer. And I did an initial order with him. It was like short ribs and eye of round or something like that. And it was our initial conversation. He walked in with this little cooler and he's unloading it. So we just have general chit chat, and I was asking him questions about his, operations. And I was like, how much wholesale do you do versus retail? And he was like, well, 90% of my business is retail and 10% is about wholesale because I hate working with restaurants. I hate working with chefs. And I was like, okay,
Cool.
cool. And he's like, you guys want the same thing. You want it to be exactly the same. You want it to be the same size. You want it to be the same fat content. And he's like, and that's not how this business runs. He's like, I can't just make money off of selling restaurants ribeyes and strip loins and tenderloins when there's only so much of that. And then I have 90% of the rest of the animal to use. And he's like, it's just not sustainable. And I was like, okay, send me a half next time and I'll figure out what to do with it. And then like my whole idea, or at least the way that I approach it, shifted. Rather than doing something that specifically what I wanted to use, then it became more of a limited spectrum of like, what can I do with this? And like, what can I take what I would like to do and then use the product that I have and try to meet it in the middle. And then ever since then, I've tried to take that with me everywhere. And like I said, if you already have an existing system, it's very hard to switch into that because it is a lot of money up front. And then there's like a lot of stuff that you realize down the road that like you need to figure out what to do with it. And it's not always like, well, you can grind it. It's like, well, then you have a lot of
Yep.
ground beef, or you have a lot of this, or a lot of that. So you need to be a little more outside the box and willing to pivot and do different things to move in that. And I think I thrive mentally a lot better that way. And then once you fold in the other kind of resources that you have with people who raise other types of animals or produce or grains or whatever it might be, it's the same entire concept, and they kind of meld together. And typically what the animal eats, it tastes just as good with that at the same time. So like letting nature do its thing is a lot easier than just trying to make something work that is either typical or not really that creative. And when it came to Touche, I was like, this is what, we need to build that. So then it started with, well, what does a butchery room look like? What do I need for that? And then we got the bandsaw, and then I just kind of built the kitchen and the food program with literally everything that we could get our hands on, every piece of equipment. So that way, when we got started, we had everything. So it wasn't like, well, if we had this, we could do this. I was like, no, we have this. So we can do whatever we want with it. And then we open with a typical menu, and then trying to work with as many local farms as possible is difficult, just because you're trying to spread out as much as you possibly can. But then you have to kind of decide, and who do you want to favor, who you don't want to favor. And then we switch the general menu concept that kind of changes like once a week or every other week, or right now it's like every 3 weeks because it is the season. In the sense that it's not existent right now. I mean, I think we're supposed to get snow like at the end of the week.
Oh, please don't tell me that's right.
There's a slight chance of that. So like we can't change it as often, but it really keeps on your toes, and like it just allows us to be more creative and take advantage of, like, sometimes the season only like lasts a week, or peas or something very tender doesn't last very long here because we have only 2 weeks of like actual spring, and then it's like 80 degrees out, and then that's the end of it for 4 months.
So how often do you find that your menu changes?
Well, right now I think we might make minor changes like every other week, but for the most part, it's been pretty solid with 3 weeks over the winter, and then I anticipate it'll go down to 2 weeks, and then it'll change like every week depending on who we're working with and what we can get our hands on. But we just print menus in house, so that way if we need to just change something, we can just change it, and it's billed and is sold on the fact that it does change. And it could be completely different the next time you come in, or it doesn't, quote unquote, reflect the menu on the website because it changes so quickly. And I will admit that I don't do that very as often as I probably should.
Is there any classics that like just can never leave the menu, or is it quite literally whatever is in season, this is what we're serving?
We always have our steak frite kind of built on that because it's still. We always have beef. We always have a steak that
Yep.
we make all of our own French fries and things like that, and a burger because again we have the ground beef, and we make our own potato rolls and our own dressings and pickles and the whole 9 yards. And those are all typically there at any given time. And then sometimes we'll add in some pretty French classics, whether it's cassoulet or bourguignon or something, just so it's something always available. And like, if you come in and you're not really feeling it like a up to a 3-course menu, you can always get a burger. You can always get a steak.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's one of the biggest challenges that you encountered that you didn't expect when you first started the business?
The weight, the actual physical aspect of waiting for stuff to get done that I have no control over. In terms of waiting for the contractors to finish this, or waiting for this to arrive, or waiting for this to arrive. And despite us not being open, I was there almost like every day anyway, getting to the point where I was like, I want to be here, but things aren't progressing fast enough because I'm literally just waiting for something to happen. And then just, I work in kitchens. I know food. Like, I understand that, but like from a financial standpoint, like all of that stuff is a very steep learning curve. And then you're like, well, you're supposed to have this, or you're supposed to have this. And then it's like, you can get them from many different places, but no one really tells you this is actually better than that place because of these reasons, unless you have a very specific financial advisor or someone who does that on the regular, or that is their business. Like, you don't really get to learn that until you go out and screw it up a few times.
Do you have any partners in the business, or is it pretty much you in terms of the ownership group?
I do have partners. We have a fairly sizable investment group that has contributed to it. But from a managing perspective, it's me and my colleague, Adam Martinez. who's from the Syracuse area. Him and I both are managing owner operators, and we're always there. So when you come in, it's going to be me and him.
How is that dynamic working with an ownership group, working with a partner? Is there any advice that you like kind of didn't expect to have to like adversities that you never expected that you've kind of had to learn to work with other people, or is there something that you kind of went into it with a different kind of sense than you have now today?
Uh, Long story short, yes and no. uh, I think we've hit every milestone that you could possibly hit in terms of like stuff going wrong. uh, we've shifted some things around. The cool thing is like once you do find people that you mesh well together, like ideas and solutions flow quite freely. And it's kind of hard to figure that out at the very beginning. And there are stories that family members or other restaurateurs who have worked together for long periods of time, and then they decide to take the jump and open their own establishment, and then it's like, why did we even do this? Because we're not meshing. So not knowing anything about the other people, kind of moving into it was probably a blessing in disguise, because it's like you have no expectations, not any bad ones and not really any good ones at the same time. So you can
Hmm.
kind of mold and kind of figure out what you needed to do based on the situation. Did it work out all the time? No. Did it work out most of the time? Yes. um, it's just hard. It's really hard to kind of perceive that or anticipate that, because you could be thinking in one entirely different direction, and then it just doesn't happen the way you want it to. And trying to be proactive is better than just being reactive with it.
Mm.
And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned is just you can anticipate things, but it's how you react to it and what you do after the fact. Because a lot of people have a tendency to dwell on, well, this happened. Well, yes, it did happen, but what are we going to do? To find a solution, and what are we going to do to make sure that it doesn't happen again? And focusing on that is way more productive than just worrying about who did you wrong or what happened and how that went wrong.
Could you give us maybe like a specific instance of this and kind of like the big overarching lesson that you can learn from it?
Um, Having things in writing and having a full concept of what those mean up front, and figuring out the solutions that kind of go with that. Like if you have a contract that you're written up, read through the entire thing and have a full understanding of what the actual verbatim language is, because a lot of those forms are just generic. They just get drafted and they fill in like pockets here and there to kind of suit your needs, but like ask questions. Just keep asking questions. There's even if you ask it over and over and over again, and it has to be explained to you over and over again, just do it. Because if you don't, and then it becomes too late, that is probably the worst mistake that you'll kind of get from that, is not understanding that legal language. If you do need to make changes, you should understand what that actually means and what that entails before you go too far down without realizing that you made a mistake or didn't make a mistake, without getting into very specific details. Um, but like just it's easy to have conversations with people
Hmm.
to get those understandings, and asking ahead of time would have been better for me in some incidences, just with like legal language and with lawyers and things like that, just because it everything happens so quickly, and they're like, well, you got to sign this, you got to sign this. And then not being afraid to be like, well, let me get quote unquote second opinion, or
Yeah.
let me have someone else look at it. Just a lot of that legal language is difficult to understand, and it's almost like purposely that it's written so you like that someone could be like, well, you don't need to read it. It's just,
Yep. Just sign here.
it's just standard. It's
Yep.
just standard stuff. It's like, well, I don't know what standard, what does standard mean?
Yep.
Like, if something happens to me or happens to somebody else, what does that really mean in the long run? Just because you say it's standard, like that I have no concept of that.
Yeah. How is it owning and operating a business in downtown Syracuse? Tell me about the vibe.
Uh, it's been interesting growing up in a small town like Oswego. Um, it's pretty clear cut. Like all the main businesses run one strip, and then all of like the conglomerate or more, large retail businesses are on the outside, the outskirts of the city. So everything feels kind of separated. So it still has the small city vibe. Downtown Syracuse is a little different because you have institutions there that have been there for 20, 25 years, almost 30 years. And then that's a very steep hill to kind of be directly physically located next to one of them. Kitty Hoynes is our neighbor. David Hoynes, great neighbor, fantastic business. Uh, we try to share or we try to contribute to each other as much as possible. He comes in to eat, we go over there. Um, but opening a business next to that, that you constantly see that they're busy, or around the corner from possibilities, you constantly see that they're busy, and then that you get in this mindset of like, well, why aren't we?
Hmm.
Well, it's like it's really hard to compare yourself to places that have been open for that long. Um, Parking is terrible, and I'm sure if you ask anyone in Armory Square, parking is just not. I
Yep.
don't. There isn't enough. The traffic is too much. And then I think that scares people a lot. The idea of having to walk a few blocks seems to be a bigger problem than anything else, despite the fact that you could park in a parking lot at a retail shopping center and you actually walk further
Yep.
than you would if you just walked 2 blocks down the street from the restaurant or the store you wanted to go to. Uh, Deliveries, trucks, and things like that, all on Fayette Street, becomes a hassle. And it's just like logistically very difficult, but a few minor tweaks here and there, maybe having Armory Square be more of a pedestrian kind of open mall would be way more beneficial, and make the parking garages free would probably help too. But I'm sure anyone in Armory Square would probably say the same thing. Um, it's definitely a city,
Hmm.
and that has its own kind of issues with that. Um, all in all, it's still I don't know if I would pick anywhere else. I think Armory Square is what I always thought downtown Syracuse was Armory Square. I never really came here a lot as a kid or even in my early adult life. And if I wasn't going to like Destiny or Carousel for
Hmm.
that matter, I wasn't really coming to Syracuse anyway. So I didn't really have a generalized idea of what that would look like. I still don't even know half the street names in downtown Syracuse. So
I was going to ask what kind of drew you specifically to Armory Square.
just the opportunity. But I also couldn't tell you otherwise. Like if someone was like, "Well, it's over," if you had to choose between these two places, which one would you choose? I don't know. Because it was there. Armory Square, I did recognize.
Hmm.
So I guess if it was recognizable to me, being from outside Syracuse, then it must be a place to be. Because if I know it, then other people would. Um, are there other neighborhoods and districts that I think would be really cool to open a restaurant in? Yeah. Um, I wouldn't have known that like 2 years ago, but Armory Square is the only thing that I really remember other than SU Hill.
Yep. Are there any trends in the kind of the restaurant industry that you see right now that are kind of taking place by and large, and kind of where do you stand in that, and where's your philosophy kind of fit into it?
Because I feel our restaurant is very niche in its own, especially in the Syracuse area. Um, we don't really follow a lot of the kind of trends that are coming through. We do tasting menus. We have a 7 course like chef's counter, and those I would say would be typical trends. Syracuse, in by large, is a little behind,
Hmm.
um,
In what way?
culinarily speaking, just because it seems like it goes through revolutions of like different kind of stages of restaurant owners and restaurants being in general. Um, because it is a big university college town, I think that has a big influence in terms of where the money comes from. And it's like it's hard because New York is attached to New York City. Uh, and I purposely word it that way because that's what it seems like most of the time. Like we're just attached
Yeah.
that by them. So like to look introspectively at larger cities like that, of course, the rest of the state feels like really behind
Yeah.
with how things are going. And that's kind of what I mean by that. But I think a lot of things are happening sooner than later because I know Buffalo was just approached to be part of the Michelin Guide's like Great Lakes kind of issue volume, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, and I do know that Toronto just got added to the Michelin Guide a few years ago. So like, there's things that are happening around the area that I think are like it's going to end up narrowing down into this vicinity, especially with the explosion that of Micron and the amount of people that are coming into there. Um, but as far as trends go, I feel like we're all doing something, whether it's Eat In, whether it's Noble Cellar, or all of these new restaurants that are opening. I know that you had the owner of Margaritas
Hmm.
in on one
Yep.
episode, and he's doing things to kind of keep up. And I would say on trend is just trying to stay in business. I think that's like the trend that everyone is trying to be on is just trying to stay in business because it's difficult. I mean, food is a necessary thing, but going out to eat is not a necessity.
Yeah.
And then with inflation and the price changing with the commodity markets and things like that, it makes it more difficult down the road for almost everything in the supply chain, whether it's feed for animals, fertilizers, or organic soil or organic fertilizers, all the way down to processing, all the way down to commodity foods, all the way down to organic foods, all the way down to individual farmers. All of those prices are increasing, which ultimately reflects on to restaurants and the prices that we have to sell things for.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit. You said the kind of revolutions or cycles that happen in the culinary space, if you will, here in Syracuse. Can you talk to me a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Um, I think, and this is a good example for even where I grew up, is you always have the heyday of like talking to older generations of being like, well, we remember when this restaurant was here. We remember when this was here. I remember when things were this like cost this much
Mm-hmm.
money. So you're constantly battling this concept that was probably very popular in the 80s and early 90s and even in the early 2000s, when the people who are visiting your restaurant were making lots of money and then the prices of things were low. So not necessarily from a culinary standpoint revolutions, I'm just mean like a cyclic nature of like trying to be nostalgic of this heyday of being like prices were lower, we made more money, and then people wanted to see like a portion versus like cost on like dishes and like to go bags and takeout food and like you know I don't think that you should go out to a restaurant and buy something and have enough food for 3 days after you've been to the restaurant, because then not only is it just a wasteful idea, um, but that's still an ongoing thing. And like I mean, you can watch like Kitchen Nightmares with Gordon Ramsay, and that's the first thing he'll say at a restaurant is like half the food is being taken out because they don't finish it here.
Yeah.
So like that's a pricing problem or a portion problem of like you could be making more money if you served a little less food because you're spending so much money to sell it for this price, but they're walking out with half of it,
Yeah.
despite the fact that it's cost so low. Um, so that's kind of what I mean by that the revolution and the cyclic nature of just like I remember when, but that's not where we are now, and trying to force that onto a business or anybody's business in Armory Square or Syracuse for that matter
Mm-hmm.
is just like a recipe for a disaster because you're setting yourself up for expectations that when you go out to eat that are really hard to do, um, as a restaurant or any other business for that matter.
Do you find that more people are going out to eat nowadays, or the same as historically, or how would you think about that one?
From a national trend, I think people are being a little more conscientious of the where they go and where they spend their money. Um, Rather, people going out on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is probably not as likely anymore because they're going to kind of reserve it for more of the weekend aspect, just because it's no longer affordable to go out and eat all the time. Um, Maybe it's the same amount of people have been going out, but they've just shifted what those days are and what they're really looking for, because of the nature of our restaurant. And we're falling into this, not falling into a pattern with it, but we definitely see a more of couples on date night or business luncheon or dinners or special occasions, and then really finding where you fit into that demographic of when people make a decision to go out to eat, why they're choosing us, and just kind of leaning into that aspect. Because trying to cover your bases and spread out too thin leaves you too many opportunities for kind of failure in that aspect, because you could cater to someone who's more into a casual aspect and on a weekday, but then you have someone who's like, we know it's a weekday, but we're gonna go and celebrate our anniversary, and they're expecting something, and then they show up and it's a little too casual for
Mm-hmm.
them. They've already set the expectation, they're already known for something, and then when you don't deliver that to them, then it has a negative influence onto it. So it's hard to capture all of that at the same exact time. Um, but I think in terms of people going out to eat, I think it's more of the same. I would like to see more people go out to eat,
Of course.
um, or at least come to our restaurant. Of course, share the wealth with everybody else, but first and more, it's I got to look for my business and my people
Of
first.
course, of course. Do you kind of your philosophy on it? Do you find that you cater? Do you look for a certain demographic of people to come through? Are you catering toward a certain crowd, or is it more that the certain crowd will organically kind of come based on what you're putting out into the community?
I think it happens a bit more organically. Once people figure out what you do and what you offer, it kind of moves the game board for yourself. Um, Trying to chase down with a certain demographic, I mean, you have to design your menu to do that. And because our menu is designed from a food standpoint and trying to take advantage of what we have to offer here in New York, and then realistically, because we want to support as many local farmers, and they also have businesses to run, and the biggest difference between like getting produce from a small farmer versus getting produce from a large scale distributor, it's cheaper to go with a large scale distributor,
Of
but
course.
they don't care if I don't order from them once or
Mm-hmm.
again or as frequently, as opposed to someone who is a small business. Like, that matters to them. Do we end up paying a little more money for that? Yes. But does that money go back into the community because they're part of our community? Yes. So from my standpoint, I want to try to support that as much as possible, and then that would be reflected on what we offer to people, because they know when you dine with us or you support our business, you're also supporting all these other little small farmers within our own community and within our own local food shed, from a food standpoint and from a business standpoint. And I think that's at least where my mind goes in that aspect. I guess if I was talking to someone who was just dealing with money all the time, they would not probably see it in that aspect, because there is a little like, I guess, philosophical, nostalgic aspect in the way that I think about it, as opposed to strictly from a monetary standpoint.
Gotcha. When it kind of turning it back to business, where do you kind of what do you set the tone with your employees or your wait staff when it comes to those kind of ideals, the way that you want your business to reflect in the community? How do you kind of make sure that that standard is set?
The cool thing since we've been open is a lot of our staff that we had has happened organically. We haven't had to do like big hiring campaigns or put out lots of ads to kind of get people to come in, and like have to shift through a bunch of resumes and applications and things like that. I would say the majority, if not nearly 90% of the people that we have had in the building at any given time, they've seeked us out on their own.
Okay.
specifically for what we do and what we have to offer. And generally, most of our interviews are really just conversations. I mean, you could show up to a job and hand in your resume to anybody, but I mean, you write your own resume in terms of how it's described and like what key items that you want people to look at.
Yeah.
But I'm more interested in having a conversation with somebody, because if we go and explain the concept and what we do there, like if there isn't any type of like, this sounds really cool, or like, I like that you guys do this, then there really isn't worth of a conversation to be had if you're not already willing to understand of what we do. Um, so in terms of setting a standard or getting people to kind of understand and work with us on that, it hasn't necessarily been that difficult to get across, because people already come in the door knowing, like, I like that you guys do this, or I like that this is your concept, and like you're doing this and you're working with this, and like it's been pretty easy to kind of set that standard because we started with it.
Yeah. They're familiar with who you are
Yes.
already.
Yeah.
Gotcha. In terms of the kind of lessons you've learned, you could say organizing or kind of running an operation and managing people as well. Any kind of big lessons that you learned over even just these last couple of years?
Oh yeah, you can't do it alone. Can't. And because I am an owner operator and I work the kitchen every service that we're open, so that means I'm not only there doing administrative stuff, I'm doing financial stuff. I'm also prepping, and I'm also writing menus, and I'm also collaborating with my kitchen staff on those items, because it is a very organic conversation amongst my kitchen staff, because we're such a tight crew. It's me and 3 other people at any given time. And then we all work autonomously but together. And because we have such an influx and sheer availability of like different ingredients to use, I allow them to kind of do what they want and decide what we're going to do for the menus coming up. But to answer your question, you need people in place. And the biggest thing that I've learned is like, I can't do it all by myself, despite my mental state saying you can do all of this by yourself, but you're not supposed to hire people to do things, to take them off of your plate. And this is so easy to do all these food puns because I do it all the time, but I'm purposely not, I'm not trying to do that. But like, find the right people, have those conversations with them, and then give those tasks, delegation to those things, because otherwise you just get caught up onto day-to-day things, that things fall through the cracks, or you miss things here and there, or you can't give them your full attention. And as an actual owner operator, like, that's what you need to focus on, is paying attention to those things, because it's super easy to get tunnel vision and focus on just one task at any given time when you have to think 3 weeks in advance on everything else. That would be my biggest piece of advice, is put those people in those places. Like, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Just because you own it doesn't mean that you have to do everything. Find those people, put them into place, allow people to help you, allow stuff to be taken off your plate, and obviously find people you can trust to do that.
Absolutely. What do you think that model of owner operator is sustainable in the long run, being there every single service? Do you find that that's something that you do out of passion, or kind of right now out of necessity? Can you tell me a little bit of your philosophy behind that?
I guess it depends on which day you're asking the question. Today is a really good day. So yes, today is like, I find it sustainable. Some days, no. Some days I'm like, how there's so much to get done. How is it going to get done? And this is all that I've done is cook food. So I can't even tell you what it would look like if I didn't have some involvement with food or cooking or just being in a kitchen. Like, I can't tell you, like, I've never not been in a kitchen doing something. And the idea of being a quote unquote clipboard chef, of just walking around and not being involved in the day-to-day operations or in a service, or just coming in the door as an owner and just kind of like observing and being like, you guys got it. I'll see you later. Like it's very hard for me to do. So I'm a bit stubborn in that aspect, but I also just like to do it. I like to work behind the line, and because we have a fully open kitchen, there are no like it's just a counter. It's kind of like how this is, with the desk between us. It's also visible, so I can also kind of set a standard of being like, this is not an atypical restaurant where the owner may not be there at any given time. Like I am there. Like I'm doing dishes. I'm doing, I take out the trash too. Like we're all on an equal playing field. Um, so a bit of it is like a stubbornness for me. And then the other half is like, I'm part of this team just as much. And I'm not going to ask anyone on our staff to do something if I'm not willing to do it myself. And that's just something I've always kind of lived by anyway. Sustainable, ask me in another year, ask me at the end of the week, and it could be a completely different answer. In the long run, probably not. At some point, I'm not saying that I'm an old man or anything, but I'm going to have to like live it up a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah.
and maybe not spend all of my time there or always thinking about it. But for right now, it's kind of hard not to.
And this is kind of like I said, our second restaurateur after Alejandro, and it's a recurring theme. So it clearly must not just be a one person thing. With the idea that margins are very very slim, basically, in the sense that you have to be performing well and be outputting in order to continue on. That being said, with that kind of mentality, what separates a really successful restaurant and what separates from a restaurant that's failing? Is it quite literally just the volume of people that you're serving through? Is kind of
Yeah.
where do you see that?
Yeah. I mean, you can keep your numbers from a cost perspective as low as possible. But if you still just don't have the actual revenue coming into the establishment, it doesn't matter how they can never be zero. Like you can't just because you ordered food once doesn't mean that you won't have to do it again. Even if you don't serve any customers, or even if your numbers were low that week, like that material, the actual raw goods, is not an infinite availability. It doesn't last forever. Some things could go bad in like 3 or 4 days. Some things
Hmm.
can go bad or has a longer shelf life. Equipment breaks down. Like there's still at any given time something that needs to be done or spent money on. And that's why I think the margins are so low is because it's not stable. It's very chaotic. It's up and down. And even if you do have good weeks, while yes, that's great to celebrate and feel good about it, but you also know that tomorrow your walk-in cooler could go down,
Hmm.
or there could be a snowstorm that snows everyone in for like 3 days, but you still have to pay those bills. You
Absolutely. Yeah.
still have to take care of your staff. Your vendors don't. Well, some vendors would care, but some vendors don't. Your bank doesn't. Like a lot of these avenues just don't care, and that aspect because this industry is so up and down and it's always a cash flow problem. Like you could have good numbers, you could have great, resources and management and the actual skeleton of your business could be fantastic. But if you just have low cash flow, money's got to come from somewhere.
Of course.
And I think that's in the conversation world of business operators from different industries, this is where things differ almost night and day. Is that the restaurant industry is so chaotic and so unpredictable. But the only predictable thing is money needs to come in and money needs to leave just as quickly as it comes in. And I think that's where a lot of people fail in that aspect because they've been in a different business for their entire life and they're like, this would be a good idea. Let's open a restaurant. And they get started with it and they're like, this was a horrible idea because it doesn't work like A, B, and C. It works like Z, S, Q, and then E.
Yep.
And then that's how you make up the business because it's around and up and down and over again.
What's one of those kind of big things that people just don't realize about the restaurant industry?
That your product goes bad. It goes bad. Like no matter what you do, it's inevitably going. It's either you sell it and it gets eaten or it gets thrown out. That's it. Like, you can work in steel industry, you can work in textiles, you can work in software. Like, everything that you produce sometimes will last forever.
Hmm.
In the food world, it does not. It just won't last. And I think that concept of being like, well, I already ordered this week, or I ordered next week, or I ordered yesterday, that doesn't mean anything. Because you could run out of product, or it could go bad, or you could get something in and half of it could be terrible or unusable. Could you get a credit? Yes. Sometimes you do, sometimes you won't, but you still paid for it and you still need to figure out what to do with it. And I think that uncertainty is like, that's the biggest surprise for some people. Overhead costs, insurance for this, insurance for that, um, and labor is quite probably a big surprise for people. I still think there are people out there who don't understand how expensive it is to pay someone to cook food or to serve somebody. They just think like, well, servers don't have to get paid as much. And it's like, no, they do.
Yeah.
It just, like, there's a difference between where the money comes from, and like the tipping system is an archaic, very old school way of doing things. And unfortunately, we still live in a country where it's very dependent upon that, whereas like almost every other country does not do that anymore. Um, so the public reflection of like, I had a terrible time, so I'm just not gonna pay that person as much money
Hmm.
because I had a terrible time. And then it goes on to, well, you should pay them more money as an owner. And it's like, I'm going to pay them more money, then we need to raise the cost of goods.
And now
And
you're gonna have a more terrible time.
then you have a more terrible time because you pay more money. And
Yep.
like, I don't think they understand that concept fully. I wish they did, or at least have a little more humility or humbleness when it comes to that concept. Because you're not only affecting the business, but you're also affecting everyone's life that's attached to it. You're affecting that server's life, because I don't know, your steak got overcooked. That has nothing to do with that server,
Hmm.
but or that employee, but you're paying them on merit, despite the fact that they had nothing
To do with that.
to do with it.
Yeah.
And that concept, like, if you just stop and think about it and take it out of context, no one would do that. But because it's in the food industry, people are like, that's acceptable. Or to treat your service staff or any of the staff in an establishment horribly because your soup was lukewarm or your coffee was too hot or it was too cold, or like, there's a lot of things when it comes to food service that some like all of this, like, you know, treat people how you want to be treated, it's like completely thrown out of the window. And I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me, but unfortunately it is the nature of the beast. And that's probably another thing that that would surprise people who get into this industry and they have no idea about. People are very ruthless sometimes.
Do you have any specific stories you'd like to share?
I mean, other chefs write books. Like, I mean, there's like books out there that just talk about horrible things. Like, there's Facebook groups that are just like that. It's just industry people talking about horrible standpoints. Do I have stories to share? Maybe not on the record. I would love to share them. But you know, some good days and bad days.
Yeah, I think that's the truth in any kind of business
Yes.
too. And I think a lot of times too, it's not necessarily what happened in the restaurant itself, but someone comes in already with a certain premonition or certain kind of expectation or something that happened to them already. They've kind of taken it out on the situation that's happening.
And that's it's that particular instance because food service, like, people are like, it's just a restaurant. It's just this. It's just McDonald's. It's just Wendy's, and it's like, or it's just, I don't know, 11 Madison Park, or it's Per Se, or any of these places. And like, what it boils down to, if you are not in this industry and you work a 9 to 5 job, or you don't, or you, whatever the industry is, when you want to feel good or you want to have a good time, you go out to eat, and you want to go that. You want to be taken care of. So I think sometimes people kind of forget that being in the food service industry, having a restaurant, we take that responsibility that if you are having a bad day when you come into the restaurant, our goal is to make sure that you have a good day at the end of it. And sometimes I think that is even tougher than any other job that you could possibly ask for, because you're taking we're taking that into our hands and making that our responsibility to make sure that you put in the 40-hour weeks, you put in the 60-hour weeks, you put in the 80-hour weeks, and you're tired and you're miserable, but you want to go out and have something good to eat. Like, we take that on our shoulders and we try to change that perspective for you. And I think people don't realize that. Like, that's hospitality. That is the nature. We're taking care of you.
Yeah.
Whether that works sometimes, yes. Whether it works, maybe not sometimes, definitely. Do we want it to work most of the time? That's what we're kind of going for. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. I think hospitality is important in any business. I mean, specifically in the hospitality industry,
Yeah.
but I think hospitality is important. And just the way, I think even for us, like we're a marketing agency, for us it's I would say 40 to 50% maybe you could say about the results of actually what we're doing, and the other 50% is how do you feel about it? How do you feel doing this process, and how does working with us, at the end of the day, do you feel satisfied? Do you feel happy with the way that you've been treated, the way we've been communicated with, et cetera? And I think that goes a longer way sometimes when maybe necessarily the service itself might not be as great, but they'll remember the way that you made them feel. One of my
Correct.
favorite books that actually, so funny story. The person that recommended I should go visit you guys, down it was my barber down the street, Kyle Patchett from Forum, and he said you should go check out Touche, really great spot. And he recommended a book to me by Danny Meyer, Setting the Table,
Hmm.
and it's really important. I think that a lot of people really do miss that when it's really more about the way that someone feels about the food or feels about the product or the service, as opposed to what the actual product or service or food is.
Yes.
And I think that's a big one that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, it's little minute details. Uh, Obviously there are more extremes, and with some of these other restaurants and some of the more higher end restaurants, where those finite details, like the feeling of a linen napkin, or like the feeling of the tablecloths, or like the minimal disturbance from your wait staff. But I'm not saying that we are at that level, but like Oliver China is Syracuse China, because we're in Syracuse.
Yep.
And like when I see people come in and they sit down and they pick the plate up and like flip it over to see what it is, like those little like that those moments where I'm like, they understand, they get it. Like that's why we chose to do that, is to have Syracuse China, because we do get people who come in and are like, this is the same pattern that my grandmother had or my parents still have, or like those little minute details. They're gonna leave and they're gonna be like, we had a great experience. We also ate off of 80-year-old china that I remember as a kid, or like all of our furniture is from Chinatown and Solvay, and then the tabletops were made up in Pulaski. So like these little details that we can share with them, people remember that, and then that's what they walk away with on top of their general experience as well. It's like it meant something to them because we allowed them to feel something.
Yeah, I think feeling something is important, especially in like a restaurant industry, any industry. Word of mouth is huge, and if people have an amazing experience, they love to rant and rave about wherever they went to, wherever they experienced, because they want people to then go also and have a great time. And people aren't going to talk well about something they didn't have a good time, because it just was a poor reflection of them. Like, oh yeah, it was great, and it wasn't actually. So those little things, those little details, they really do speak to people like deeply and corely. Do you guys do anything besides just kind of the typical posting stuff on online, anything like that, like specific that you guys do to bring people in, or is it more that you just want everyone that comes through the doors to have an amazing time and leave touched and wanting to share the good news of Touche with everyone?
Marketing and social media content is not my forte. I remember when Instagram came out. and I just posted pictures of my dog. And that's pretty much all that I've ever done with it. So there are lots of other people out there that do a way better job when it comes to social media and marketing campaigns and things like that. I just try to show what people can have, like show good experiences. And really, what has helped us tremendously is just people coming in and taking those photos themselves and posting it themselves, and not really, they don't have to say much about it. They can just be like, experience. This is my experience. We have a host that works with us, and she does such an immaculate job to make everyone who comes in feel the most important person in the world.
Hmm.
Whether it's name tags, whether it's like finding out why they're there, and like leaving little notes and making sure there's fresh flowers and all these things, and people like that, and then they end up sharing that as like, oh, we came here, they knew my name, they knew why we were there, like they made us a little card. Like we just do that regularly. It doesn't have to be like, it could just be your first time, and she would write a little card that says welcome, and people remember that and they share that. So I guess a lot of what we do is through word of mouth and just like people sharing their experiences, and then we just kind of repost that and just reshare that. And I'm sure there's lots of other avenues and other methods to do that, but that's above my pay grade and purview.
What does the next, let's call it 5 years of Touche look like? What's the future?
To still be open. Ideally, to still be open. I would. It's hard because like it's my first one, my first restaurant, and like obviously in your spare time you're like, well, what if I did this, or like what if we did it this way, or if I had to start over I would do it this way, or like we could, really fine tune it and like really get a more nuanced direction with it. But realistically, I expansion, I don't know. I don't even know the first thing about that. Um, really just making sure people are taken care of, I'm taken care of, my staff are taken care of, the business is taken care of, and we're just successful. And that's what I'm hoping within the next 5 years, that it's just still on an upward trend and not anything else. Um, I guess I'm a little too narrowly focused on the immediate uh, prospect of the business to really forwardly think about what that looks like.
Hmm.
But I do know that there are people in my party that have ideas and they want it to go in this direction. It is part of a hospitality group that could expand into other concepts, whether it's my staff want to do something and then we just reinvest into our staff and into their own business ideas and we expand that way. Um, Maybe not necessarily me doing that, um, but really just kind of branching out and working with as much and many people as we can within our local community and food shed. I would
Awesome.
hope.
Yeah, hope to be able to talk about Touche in the same way that we talk about those establishments. It's a local icon that's going to be, a long to last and here to stay.
You and me both.
I always like to ask this question to close. I always like to ask every single person. Our podcast is called Standing on Business, and kind of the idea behind that phrase is the thing at the end of the day. You boil it all down. This is what I'm about. This is who I am as a business owner. This is who I am as an entrepreneur, as an owner. This is the thing that I stand on. If we asked Jeff, what is the thing that he stands on? What's the business that you stand on?
Uh, I'm not going to ask anyone to do anything that I'm not going to do myself. Whether that's from a fiscal standpoint, whether that's a physical standpoint, whether that's maintenance, whether that's anything else, you lead through example, you lead by example. And I think every foundational aspect in our business is literally built on that. Um, we have nothing to hide behind. The kitchen is open. Everything is done. What you see, we cook in front of you. We explain it in front of you. and there's no curtain to hide behind. And I think that's what I stand behind as a business owner and as a chef and as a person.
Awesome.
I hope that was,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. I was like,
that's
yeah, I
yeah,
hope that's a good enough answer.
that's a good one. That's a good one. No, I think that's very good. I think that sometimes people they ask of others that which they would not do themselves, and sometimes then you look back and you think like, will that even person want what I sign myself up to do? What I just asked someone to do? And I think that's a really good point of integrity, if you will, as a business owner.
And then, one thing that I have learned is like, this is like my restaurant, or it's, mine and Adam's restaurant and all of our investors. And I think one thing business owners kind of forget sometimes is like when you do have staff members and you do have employees, uh, you have to understand what their goals are. Because like I want this restaurant to be successful, and I want it to do this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who works for me wants, I mean, they want the same thing because they want a job, but that doesn't mean that's their end goal
Yeah.
is to work at Touche for the rest of their lives because they want Touche to succeed. Like they have different ideas and they have different future plans, and it could be a stepping stone. It could be a jumping off point for them. And I think as a business owner or a manager, you need to find out what those are for those people. Uh, because if you help them achieve what they want, then they're going to do what they can to help achieve what you want. And then it's, I'm not asking you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself,
Yeah.
just like you wouldn't do the same thing.
Exactly.
So I think that's an important lesson that any business owner should kind of remember. Like, yes, they are loyal to you to a T or to a certain point, unless you find out what they want in life. And if you can help them, then they'll help you.
Yeah. I think a big one too for business owners to realize is that, and this is at least a lesson that I've learned, at least for myself, is that just because I'm crazy enough to do something for my business, it doesn't mean that someone that's realistically speaking here to just work their hours or work their, do their very best, and they're not willing to do that craziness that you are willing to do. It's not necessarily it's you would hope that they're passionate about the business just the same way you are, but to the certain kind of there
Yes.
it gets to a point where it's kind of like this is insanity. Like I'm doing this right now, but like if someone asked me to do this right now, I wouldn't do this.
Correct.
So you can't ask someone to do
No.
and
You can't
expect them to be at that same kind of level.
You can't expect them to have the same passions and the same drive that you do, especially when it comes to your own business. But if you can find out what their drive and their passion is for theirs, and if you help them achieve theirs, they're more likely to help you succeed at the same time.
Absolutely. Jeff, thank you so much for this time. It's been an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much.
I hope to be able to continue to patronize Touche. Check out. I didn't realize that the menu changes that often.
Yes.
That's going to be a very interesting thing to come check out. It gives me a reason to come check it out even more.
Please do.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been another episode of Standing on Business. If you guys have any suggestions, or if you are a business owner, organization leader here in the Central New York area, we'd love to talk with you. Please feel free to reach out to us, Instagram, any social media platform. We're out there, Black Stag Industries. Thanks, and we'll see you guys in the next one.